I never thought anything interesting would happen in our sleepy suburban neighborhood. My life was predictable, if not painfully routine. Married for 8 years, my husband and I had fallen into the kind of silence that creeps into a relationship when nothing is exactly wrong, but nothing feels particularly right either. We spoke in logistics: groceries, bills, work schedules. The warmth we once had faded into something tolerable and distant. I didn't even notice it vanishing until I met Mr. Carter. He moved in next door about a year ago. 60, maybe a little older. Always in crisp polos. His silver hair neatly combed. Widowed, he said. No children. Quiet, respectful, polite. The kind of man who returned your trash bins to your driveway without being asked. At first, he was just the neighbor. Then came the little chats by the fence, the occasional help lifting boxes, the small smiles that lasted a second too long. I found myself drawn to him, not in a sexual way at first, just curious. He listened when I spoke. Not just nodded but listened. It was so strange how rare that had become. One afternoon I was pruning the bushes by the fence and he asked how my week was. I caught myself telling him about work frustrations I hadn't even told my husband. He nodded thoughtfully, gave a bit of advice, and asked if I needed help with a hedge trimmer. I declined, but his presence lingered with me for the rest of the day. That summer we began to wave more often. He always seemed to be on his porch at just the right time. It started feeling like he was waiting. Maybe I was too. Once, I glanced out the kitchen window and saw him shirtless, wiping sweat from his forehead after mowing the lawn. I looked away quickly, heart fluttering for reasons I didn't want to examine. Then came the shower. I was walking our dog along the side path between our houses when I heard water running. His bathroom window was cracked open. I told myself I was just being nosy, just curious about how he lived. But I paused. Through the fogged glass, I could barely make out his silhouette. Stronger than I'd expected, leaner. The realization of what I was doing hit me a second later. I turned away instantly, face burning. But something had been stirred. That night I couldn't sleep. I told myself I didn't mean to look. I told myself it was harmless. But my thoughts betrayed me, looping back to that steamy glimpse, that outline behind the glass. I felt disgusted with myself. And yet I was more awake than I'd felt in months. That was the moment everything changed. Something in me had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about him, and worse, I didn't want to. I started finding reasons to be outside when I knew he would be. Watering the plants in the morning, checking the mail in the afternoon, pretending to need something from the car in the evening. Every time our paths crossed, something unspoken lingered in the air. He wasn't overt, never inappropriate, but his eyes held something. Awareness, curiosity, maybe recognition. It made me nervous, but I didn't avoid it. I welcomed it. He began to compliment me in ways that felt deeper than surface level. "You always seem calm, even when things feel chaotic," he said once, after I vented about a broken appliance. It wasn't flirtation. It was something more dangerous. Attention paired with understanding. My husband hadn't said anything like that in years. When I brought up the comment to a friend, I laughed it off. "He's just being nice," I said, but I didn't believe it. One afternoon, clouds rolled in and the rain started hard and fast. I was coming back from the store when he waved me toward his porch. I hesitated, then joined him under the awning. We watched the rain for a minute before he offered me tea. I followed him in, soaked and laughing, brushing water from my jacket. His house was quiet, warm, comfortable in a way that made me feel oddly at home. We sat close on the couch, sipping from mismatched mugs. He told me about his wife. Her laugh, her cooking, the way she'd always fill the house with music on Sundays. I didn't expect to feel jealous of a woman who wasn't even alive. I found myself leaning in, caught in his stories, in his voice. When I mentioned how things had grown cold between me and my husband, he didn't pry. He just nodded. "People forget how much the little things matter," he said. I stared at him a second too long. He looked back, eyes still waiting. His hand brushed against mine when I set my mug down. Neither of us moved away. That silence stretched, charged and fragile. Then a quiet smile from him. No invitation, no move. Just tension, honest and undeniable. I left before it could go further. My heart was racing, throat tight, guilt already creeping in. I told myself nothing had happened. But it had. The next few days I couldn't shake him. I remembered every word, every glance, every bit of heat in that silence. My husband didn't notice the change in me. Or maybe he did and didn't want to face it. I found myself going through the motions. Cooking, cleaning, working, but none of it felt real. My mind was elsewhere. I knew I was standing on a line I wasn't supposed to cross. But I also knew something had been awakened in me. Not just desire, something deeper. A craving for connection, attention, to be seen. And he saw me. Not as a wife or a neighbor. As a woman. That was all it took for everything to start unraveling. He had mentioned a plumbing issue the week before. Low water pressure in the upstairs bathroom. I offered to help him find someone, but he waved it off with a smile. That morning my husband had left early for work. The house was quiet, too quiet, and I found myself restless. I stepped outside and noticed his back gate slightly open. I told myself I was just checking in, making sure everything was okay. His front door wasn't locked. Called out once, lightly, then again. No answer. I walked in just a few steps. The house smelled like cedar and something warm. I heard the water running upstairs. The bathroom door was open a crack, steam billowing out. I should have left. Every part of me knew that. But I didn't. I froze, the air thick with heat and something heavier. He stepped out of the shower, towel around his waist, startled but calm when he saw me. I stammered something about the gate, about checking if everything was okay. He didn't respond right away. Just looked at me. Not confused. Not angry. Just waiting. The silence stretched again, the same kind that had hovered between us before, but now there was no space to pretend. I saw the way his chest moved with his breath, slow and steady. I couldn't look away. He stepped closer, still damp, the smell of soap clinging to him. I should have left. I didn't. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. 1 second there was space, and the next there wasn't. Our mouths met. My hands on his shoulders, his hands at my waist, pulling me in. Everything felt loud. My heartbeat, my breath, the blood rushing in my ears. I'd imagined it before, but nothing came close to how real it felt now. There was no hesitation once it began. It wasn't rushed, but it was desperate. The kind of desperation that comes from holding something in too long. Every touch, every sound, it all poured out like something that had been waiting. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't even feeling guilt. Not yet. I was inside a moment I couldn't stop. When it was over, we didn't speak. He looked at me, eyes soft, no regret on his face. That somehow made it worse. I dressed in silence, hands shaking. He didn't ask me to stay. I didn't wait for him to. I walked home in a fog, the reality of what I'd done only beginning to settle in. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just sat on my bed, still in the clothes I had put on that morning, staring at the wall. The worst part wasn't the act itself. It was how easy it had been. How natural it had felt. I had crossed a line I could never uncross, and there was no one to blame but myself. The days after were a blur. I didn't go next door. I didn't even look in that direction. I moved through my house like a ghost, doing what was expected. Smiling when spoken to, answering texts, showing up to work. But inside everything had shifted. I kept waiting for the guilt to overwhelm me, to drown me in regret. It never came in a wave. It crept in quietly, in the smallest moments. Folding laundry, brushing my teeth, setting dinner on the table for a man who still kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. He didn't notice, not really. He asked if I was tired, said I'd seemed a little off. I nodded, blamed work, the weather, hormones. Anything but the truth. I wanted him to pry. I wanted to be caught. But he didn't. He trusted me. That trust felt heavier than anything else. Not because it was undeserved, but because I knew I'd shattered it and he had no idea. A few days later, there was a note slipped into my mailbox. No name, no signature. Just a single line in neat handwriting. I won't speak of it, but I won't forget. I read it 5 times, my stomach turning tighter each time. I knew it was him. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even romantic. It was a simple acknowledgement that what happened was real, and that it didn't disappear just because I was pretending it hadn't happened. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Our silence said everything. We still saw each other, of course. That was unavoidable. From across our driveways, brief glances, small nods, the bare minimum of neighborly interaction. But there was no returning to what we were before. Something had broken open and couldn't be closed again. Home, I tried harder. I became more attentive, more affectionate, more patient. Not out of love, but out of guilt. Out of fear that if I didn't overcompensate, he'd notice the hollow space where my loyalty used to be. I kept telling myself that if I acted like nothing happened long enough, I might start to believe it. But the truth lingered. Every time I heard water running in the bathroom, I remembered the heat of the steam. Every time my husband touched me, I flinched just slightly, and I hated that he didn't notice. I was living 2 lives. One where I was still the woman he believed in, and one where I wasn't sure who I had become. I never told anyone. Not a friend, not a stranger, not a therapist. But I wrote it all down once, posted it anonymously, as if confession to the void might lighten the weight. Didn't. He still lives next door. He still tends to his plants and waves at the mailman. We don't speak about it. We never will. But sometimes I catch his eye and I know he remembers. Just like I do. That 10-minute mistake or whatever it was didn't destroy my life. But it changed it. Quietly, permanently, in a way no one else will ever see.